So yesterday was Apple's Scary Fast event, which was actually a scary fast event. It was only about 30 minutes long, and I feel like in any other era of Apple, this would have been a website refresh, especially if it was like the Intel era. But because it's Apple Silicon, of course, we got to have a whole event tied to it, and, well, we got a little bit out of it, and something interesting that was just some text at the end that ended up being a whole video that they put out today. So we'll talk about that later, but for the first part, let's just talk about the hardware that was announced and what it's going to be living in. So first things first, we got 3 new chips. We got the M3, M3 Pro, and M3 Max. And these take a lot of what we actually saw introduced with the iPhone 15 Pro, and they're bringing it to the Mac, which is good. I'm not actually trying to downplay it by saying that it was on the iPhone first, but it is cool to see. Those features include the new 3nm process that they're running, so efficiency is going to be a lot better, as well as improved graphics, which was a big deal on the iPhone and is even more of a big deal on these chips for the Mac. The 3nm process, of course, just means that you're going to be able to fit a lot more on a single die, and you're going to improve efficiency, as you can tell by these not so helpful charts that Apple seems to want to continue to use. Though something interesting with these charts is that aside from the number of times that they were pointing out Intel being slower than the Apple Silicon platform, they actually started comparing the M chips, specifically the M1, to the M3. So instead of making comparisons to other brands, they're finally comparing themselves to themselves. I know that might seem like a weird thing to focus on, but that is actually very helpful for people like me who know what the M1 and M1 Max are capable of and are curious to see what they're going to be like compared to the newest offerings from Apple. And funnily enough, this new platform may have actually convinced me to upgrade to a newer system. Not for the desktop, I'm keeping that as long as I possibly can, but more on the mobile side, which we'll talk about more in a minute. Alongside the better efficiency that we got out of the 3nm process, we also now have some improvements to the performance of the actual processor. That'll be nice. It means that we can hopefully throw a little bit more at these systems, though I never really ran into an instance where I felt like my M1, either the standard or the Max, were struggling, but hey, now you got even more headroom, and it might mean that Apple will catch up or potentially be faster than what Qualcomm is saying is going to be coming out with their new Snapdragon chip, which is funny because most other ARM manufacturers have been pretty far behind in the ARM race, but it seems like Qualcomm is finally catching up or passing Apple, and we'll see if Apple meets or exceeds what Qualcomm's throwing their way. But the biggest improvement Apple really wanted to talk about for the M3 platform was the graphics improvement. So we have more graphics cores, and we have a really interesting memory management system that's supposed to be invisible to the developers, but instead of caching memory when it anticipates a high load, it essentially provides exactly what's needed as it's needed. And that might be super helpful for really demanding tasks. It may be helpful for gaming, though I know with a lot of games they just kind of say how much memory they need and just take that and use it. So I'm thinking it's probably going to be more useful for hardware accelerated processes like video rendering or 3D animation or basically anything that uses the graphics system that isn't gaming, but time will tell. Apple also brought over the hardware-accelerated ray tracing that we saw introduced with the A17 Pro and the iPhone 15s, and we also have a mesh shader system. Now, neither of these are new for PC users, but with Apple pushing gaming on the Mac as much as they are, and considering that it seems like they are going for this cross-platform gaming setup where you can play the Resident Evil 4 remake on your phone or on the Mac, I feel like having these available to developers is going to make the gaming experience on a Mac better for us and make the gaming development experience for people bringing games to the Mac a little more appealing. I know that might be wishful thinking, but man, I would love to see some modern AAA titles coming to the Mac that were, well, introduced alongside their other counterparts, like the Windows releases, as opposed to being released later because, hey, we finally ported it to the Mac. I guess we'll see, because I am actually interested in trying out gaming on the Mac. I'm trying out that game porting toolkit that they've introduced so you can play Windows games through a translation layer, but I've been struggling to get that to work quite right, so don't hold your breath for that video, but if they make it easier, maybe we'll see gaming finally hit the Mac, and with hardware-accelerated ray tracing and mesh shaders, it might be reasonable. I guess time will tell, but I am actually really curious to see how gaming performance is on the M3 Max, considering you can get up to 40 GPU cores on that thing, which is going to be pretty impressive considering the high-speed RAM is shared with system and graphics, and now you have 40 cores of it and ray tracing and all this stuff. It'll be pretty interesting to see, especially since the M3 Pro and Max, actually every chip, is being introduced first in the MacBook Pros and the iMacs. So let's talk about those now. So if you look at Apple's website now, the design refreshed version of the MacBook Pros are it now. That is the only way to get a MacBook Pro, either the 14-inch or the 16-inch, which means that finally the horrible Touch Bar MacBook Pro that only had 2 USB-C ports and a headphone jack is gone. It's dead. It can't hurt you anymore. It's gone. They only offer the 14-inch and 16-inch models of the MacBook Pro, which means that you can get a MacBook Pro with the new M3 chip base configuration with all the ports that I've wanted from a MacBook Pro without having to go with a Pro or a Max chipset, which I've always wanted that. I've never felt like I needed the Pro or the Max on the go. In fact, my on-the-go machine has been an M1 iPad Pro for a while. It's just I need macOS for full-blown Final Cut. Final Cut on the iPad is kind of not great right now. So with me traveling more, I think that I might actually get the M3 MacBook Pro, which means I'll also be able to review it. So that'll be fun. But yeah, so now you can get the M3 in a MacBook Pro, and that MacBook Pro gives you the SD card reader, the HDMI slot, the high performance headphone jack, 2 Thunderbolts, and MagSafe. And if you want a 13-inch, yeah, I guess now you only have the MacBook Air as an option, but I mean, who was buying a MacBook Pro for the Touch Bar, really? Besides, every MacBook Pro you buy now has the ProMotion display, so that really nice high refresh rate, and it is the XDR display, so you do get the notch, but you do get a better overall size. I'm kind of excited, and yeah, I'm definitely going to get one since I'm going to be traveling more. Apple also introduced a new color for these MacBook Pros so that you can tell that you have the latest and greatest MacBook Pro, unless you buy the M3 version like me, because the M3 Pro and the M3 Max versions can be bought in a space black color, which I think looks really cool. I think it's a really good look to the laptop, but you don't get it if you get the M3. So nobody's going to know that you have the latest and greatest MacBook Pro, which, considering one of the places I'm traveling to is California, is probably okay because it's less likely to be stolen, but yeah, it's kind of weird that they would have made that specific difference, but if you're really into the colors, I guess you gotta get a Pro model, but I don't care. I'm gonna get Space Gray anyway. But yeah, externally, the MacBook Pro's only got 1 refresh on 2 variants, and it's just the Space Black version, whereas if you get the M3, it's just Space Gray. Other than that, the MacBook Pros are exactly the same, and the only big changes are then internal, and at least upgrade to 16 gigs of RAM if you're getting a MacBook Pro, because they still offer it with 8 gigs of RAM, even though the base storage configuration is 512. I don't personally understand that, but whatever. And then the last Mac at this event to get the M3 chip was the iMac, which it took them long enough. I mean, the thing was still running the M1 chip. The iPad Pro got an update from the M1 to the M2, and the iMac was still rocking M1. And of course, that means that they're going to show all these comparisons and the huge performance differences, alongside talking a lot about Intel and how the performance over Intel was really impressive. But let's be real. You really weren't comparing a latest Intel chip to your system. You were comparing the last Intel Mac you made, which wasn't running the latest Intel chip, to your newest chips. Now, if you had been comparing modern Intel chips in terms of wattage or general efficiency or temperature, oh yeah, you would have buried them. But raw performance, yeah, let's just not go there. But yeah, either way, the iMac got the new M3 chip, and nothing else changed aside from that. We still have the 4.5K display, no bigger sizes. We still have all the colors, no new colors. We don't have any Pro options or any option to select the M3 Pro chip, and it still starts at 8 gigabytes of RAM and 256 gigs of storage, which I would recommend upgrading the storage at least, even for the general consumer, though I don't really know if 8 gigabytes of RAM, especially with the unified memory that they're using, I don't know if that's going to be a problem for the general user, since I still use an 8 gigabyte RAM system for my server, and it hasn't been an issue, and it keeps up fine with general tasks, so it just depends on who this iMac is being marketed to, and it's pretty clear this iMac's being marketed at the general consumer. Though it is funny that the M3 is powerful enough that they are considering it a Pro chip in the MacBook Pro, but also generally accessible enough that they can put it in an iMac and it's fine for the average person. Kind of a weird time in terms of Apple's chipset lineup, but I mean, I'm not going to complain. But in total, that was the event. We got a new look for the MacBook Pros in terms of colors, with new guts in terms of the new M3 chips. Of course, all the M3 chips, and the iMac got an update. But that was it. Again, it could have literally been a website refresh, but they made a whole event out of it, which is fine. It's just kind of weird. The big thing for me that I was super impressed by actually came at the very end as a bit of text underneath the Apple logo. Filmed on iPhone. See, in my video where I was talking about my experiences with the iPhone 15 Pro Max, I said that for years I had been using my iPhones as a pickup camera if I just needed to get a quick shot of something, or if I wanted to throw a video together real quick, and it worked just fine. And the iPhone 15 Pro is the closest we've gotten to feeling like the phone is actually a usable camera alongside being a phone. And well, Apple literally did that for this event. All these fancy drone shots, all of these demos, everything was shot on iPhone, and it had me fooled. And that's saying something, because I tend to nitpick Apple events because the production value is always so high and so impressive, and I would have never guessed that it was filmed on iPhone. Like this video is being filmed on iPhone, which you could probably tell considering I'm using the cinematic mode instead of using ProRes, just because I wanted a bit more background blur. But yeah, I was genuinely impressed that Apple pulled that off on this event with this phone. So that's just a little thing I noticed, and yeah, I am curious to see if they do it again, though I feel like this short 30-minute segment that they did was probably the best test bed for it. I guess we'll see if they do anything more with that in the future. But yeah, that was the entire event. We got 3 new chips with the M3, M3 Pro, and M3 Max. We finally lost the Touch Bar MacBook Pro in lieu of getting the 14-inch MacBook Pro with the M3, M3 Max, and M3 Pro. I said those out of order, but that's fine. Some new colors for the upper tiers of the MacBook Pros, but not for the one that I want to buy, of course. And we got an iMac that finally has a modern chip in it again. So all of that was really interesting, and the fact that it was all shot on iPhone just kind of tickled my brain a little bit in how they did that, because as a cinematographer, I was just fascinated with it. They did a whole video about it. I'll probably link it down below, or I can just put it up there if it lets me. But yeah, just kind of interesting, and I'm fixating way too much on that. But let me know what you all think down in the comment section down below. What did you think of the event? Do you think it could have just been a website refresh? Because aside from the M3 introduction, I feel like most of this would have been just a website refresh by any other era of Apple. But of course, it's M3, so we get all this stuff now. Either way, that's been it. Thank you all so much for watching. I will hopefully be making a video at some point talking about why I'm going to be getting the M3 MacBook Pro, and maybe making a video about the M3 MacBook Pro when I get it. In fact, I can almost guarantee I'll do that. So make sure to subscribe if you don't want to miss that. Like this video if you did like it. It means a lot and really helps the channel if you do. And aside from that, I'll see you all in the next video. Thank you all so much for watching, and have a good one.